Hello friends, this is Promi and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.1 pre-release. The public pre-release of Kerbal Space Program is now available if you opt in on the beta tab if you have the Steam version. Unfortunately, the pre-release is only available on Steam right now, so if you have KSP through the Kerbal Space Program store, you won't be able to get the pre-release at this time. Version 1.1 is a very large update, mostly behind the scenes stuff. The biggest thing has been an engine update from Unity 4 to Unity 5. One of the big things this enables is a stable 64-bit version, so you'll be able to use all your RAM for KSP. This will enable players who care to have as many mods as they want without running into the 4GB RAM limit. Performance has been greatly increased in many areas. You can see this crazy monstrosity I have here on the launch pad. This is a 350 part craft, and as you can see, performs quite well still, getting decent frames. Only thing is there's now a small delay whenever you stage, but if this is the price to pay for much greater performance on high part count crafts, then I'm willing to pay that price. Although I do hope that they can minimize the delay there before the proper release of 1.1. One of the most notable changes with the interface is the right-click context menus here. You can move them about, and they stay put. They also have this line pointing at the part that they are pertaining to. Also, you can pin them, so you can have multiple things up like so, and they will stay up no matter where you click. While we're in orbit here, we can take a look at the new orbit track rendering. You can see they sort of lose opacity as you go around, so it's quite a bit easier now to see the direction that one is orbiting. That's true for both vessels and also moons. Zoom right out on the Kerbal system here. It's very easy to tell the direction of all the planets. While we're in space here, let's also look at the new KSPedia. It has a pause button here, so if you are in a game scene like we are, you can pause. Obviously not very necessary if you're at the Space Center, but handy to have here. KSPedia is pretty comprehensive. We have the manual section here, which has basic stuff about the interface, gameplay related things. More interestingly, I think, is we have things like space travel and orbital definitions. Here we can have some actual real-life orbital mechanics information. So this stuff all very handy for people new to the game. Got basics of rocketry, also basics of aircraft, describing various forces at work. You have more in-game related stuff, like information about the various celestial bodies. This whole thing probably is not really of much interest to the veteran players, but I think it's very nice to have, especially that orbital mechanics stuff in-game for the new KSPers. Okay, let's take a look at the new parts. First of all, we have these three, which are not strictly new, but previously they were only available in the Asteroid Day official mod, and now all the parts from that mod, minus the camera module, are now part of the base game. So you have this Probodobodyne Hex 2, which is a top-level probe core with quite strong reaction wheels, and also a fairly large battery. We've got this OX Stat XL, which is 4 of the smaller OX stats stuck together. And we have the Communitron HG55, which is another larger antenna. Then we have landing gear, which is not strictly new. The largest landing gear has a new model, and the smallest one does as well, to fit the newer ones designed by PorkJet. This size here is new, and what they did was they took the larger model and shrunk it down to this new size, and they took the largest model and shrunk it down, and the largest gear now has this 6-wheel model. So where there was before 3 gears, there is now 4, and now they all have functional lights as well. Finally, there's this inflatable heat shield, stack mountable. As you can see, I'm just going to decouple that decoupler on the end. And there you can see our new heat shield. Let's inflate it. There, look at that. It's quite large, 10 meters. This can aerobrake some quite large payloads into Eve or Joule, or even if you have something very large to return to Kerbin. Of note, it doesn't have any ablator like the smaller heat shields do, but it is highly heat resistant. It also has its own decoupler, so we can jettison it. We have a new IVA cutaway feature. If I just go down here to where my crew portraits are and click this button right here, you can't see it like that, but there you go, it says interior overlay. Click that and then you can see all the Kerbals in their cabins. In some, like the cockpit here or the inline one, it just makes the windows transparent, but in some of the cabins it actually gives you a cutaway. It does affect performance somewhat, but it is a toggle, so it is optional as always. Got lots of Kerbals in there. Here we have our capsules. There's the Mark 1. Lander can, you can see in the back as well. Some more in the Mark 2. Lander cans here. Got our science lab. Only have Kerbals in the middle level of that. Hitchhiker storage containers up here. Got the cupola. And then I have the Mark II stuff on the end here. So I think this will come quite in handy for screenshot and cinematic purposes. Let's turn it off, and if you also look down here, you'll notice some other new buttons. And also we have our Kerbal's stats and jobs on mouse over. But if we use these buttons here, we've got add slot and remove slot. What this does is allows you to have as many portraits shown as you can fit beside the nav ball. You can also shrink it down if you only want to have 1 or even 0. So it's nice to have those options. The search function has been overhauled in the editor. The search bar is now always visible, whether or not you have the simple or advanced mode pulled out here. You can also search your entire parts inventory, and the parts are now tagged with metadata, and modders can tag their modded parts with metadata as well. So this leads to things like searching for orange. We'll show the big orange tank as well as orange engines and orange parachutes. Do things like rover, show you wheels, rover bodies, command seats. Probe will bring up small liquid engines, ion engines, probe cores, monopropellant engine. You could do more typical searches like liquid fuel. If I spell it properly, we'll give you all the liquid fuel tanks as well as liquid fuel engines. And for a little bit of humor, you can go more, and that'll show you more boosters, more struts, and more lights, which is what I believe that Bob Fitch always wants. Fairings now have some additional options to them. If I look here, we've got side control, so you can control how many pieces the fairing splits into, and there's also this new clamshell option, which allows your fairing to come apart more like real fairings, or like the procedural fairings mod, instead of like confetti pieces. It doesn't actually change how it looks in the editor, but let's turn it on and maybe set the sides to 3. Let's go to the Launchpad and see what that looks like. Okay, let's see how our fairings look. Nice. So that's your clamshell fairings in 3 pieces. As with many of the game's systems, Squad had to rebuild the wheel physics from scratch for 1.1, just using a stockified version of my runabout from my Kerbal Commonwealth series. And I'm already feeling that it handles quite a bit differently. For one thing, the wheel turning is not instantaneous anymore. Also, it's much more difficult to flip rovers, although it's much easier to spin them out. You can see I'm drifting all over the place. There are new options on the wheels. We've got traction control, and you can see there's this new wheel stress bar. The friction control and traction control are on auto right now, but I can change those. So what happens if I turn friction control way up? What happens now? Woo, there we go. That was interesting. They are definitely still working on the wheel physics. They currently have a few bugs with phantom forces. And yeah, this certainly seems a little wonky. Let's turn the traction control back to auto. Let's get back up to speed and try to spin around one more time and see what happens. Here we go. Yep. So on auto, pretty much, you know, full speed and then a hard turn. Rover doesn't flip at all, just spins out. One of the problems I always used to have with landing gear, especially when they were canted out like this on this modified Thunderbird, I think that's what this stock craft was called, is that it was very easy for your aircraft to flip out on takeoff and landing. So I just wanted to try seeing how it behaved in 1.1. Does seem pretty solid on takeoff. Let's try yawing about a bit. Yeah, it actually does seem to stay on course a little better. So let's take her around and see how the landings are. Going to try to come in pretty fast here for our landing test. At least fast for stock KSP. This is more typical for in my Commonwealth game where I play with Ferrum Aerospace. Oh. Okay, and let's yaw about a bit, see how it behaves. Yeah, I think the whole sliding with the rovers, that behavior does seem to make planes a little less likely to fall over and explode. We flipped all around and still okay. Little something for career mode here in contracts. Contracts are now weighted, so any contract that or a contract type that you do a lot of will show up more often. So if you particularly like, say, science contracts, then you'll be offered more of those. And if you really dislike part test contracts, by declining them, you do take the reputation hit, but you'll see less of them in the future. And finally, just a little thing, but this made me very happy, was they changed it so that when you transmit with an antenna, it remembers its deployed state from before. So if I have my antennas deployed, as I like to have them, and then transmit, they stay deployed afterwards. There have been a number of little changes like this. I'll link to the full changelog from the KSP forums down in the description. And I hope you have enjoyed this quick look at KSP 1.1 pre-release. So, this has been Promi. Thanks for watching.